Northwood Cemetery on the Isle of Wight is a special place. A Victorian cemetery in a woodland setting, with historic buildings dating from 1856. It is a 17-acre green site in Northwood, Isle of Wight, and the second largest cemetery on the island, with over 17,000 burials. It is a site of importance for nature conservation, with countless species of flora and fauna, many of them rare. A place for quiet reflection, a place to learn more about local heritage, the lives and the deaths of a community which over the decades has suffered from hardship and faced challenges, but a community that has also achieved great things. Unfortunately though, a few years ago the cemetery was in decline. Still loved by local people and benefiting from the work of many tireless volunteers, but its buildings were collapsing at a risk of demolition. Road services were in a poor condition, and much of the heritage and conservation value was at risk of being lost forever. A partnership between the Isle of Wight Council and the Friends of Northwood Cemetery secured a £1.6 million grant from the Heritage Lottery Fund and the Big Lottery Fund, and the cemetery today is restored and rescued for future generations to enjoy. The two mirrored chapels, which date from 1856, once in a very sorry state, have been underpinned and fully restored. Now open again for local community use, the East Chapel is consecrated and can be used for services. Its bell, made by the makers of Big Ben and known locally as Little Ben, hadn't worked for decades, but now, restored, it rings out across the site. The West Chapel is now a heritage resource centre, full of interesting heritage and conservation information, activities for young people, and family history research. Behind the chapels stand 4 imposing cedar trees believed to have been planted in the late 1800s. Some people think that many of the trees here may have been donated by Queen Victoria. During the Second World War in 1941, 2 bombs landed in the cemetery at the rear of the chapel, causing huge damage. The explosion catapulted a piece of graveside railing 40 feet into one of the cedars of Lebanon. It remains there today. The front part of the cemetery, dating from 1856, is laid out in a formal Victorian grid pattern and contains the grave of James Cribb, a local shoemaker, the first person to be buried here in 1856. The cemetery has a large collection of Victorian, Edwardian and modern memorials. From plain headstones to elaborate memorials, many of these have now been restored thanks to the grant. The memorials capture the history of the Cowes area, imposing memorials for wealthy Victorian families such as the Custs, Barings and Colvilles, and the memorials such as Little Don, a little boy aged 21 months who fell into a lime pit and died in 1905. The cemetery is also the final resting place for some very influential local people, such as John Redfern, the founder of the world-famous fashion house John Redfern and Sons, who died in 1895 and whose clientele included Queen Victoria and her daughters. Alfred Fennings was buried here in 1900. Famous for producing over-the-counter medicines such as cough remedies, who moved his chemist business to Cowes in 1850. The brand, although not the business, continues to this day. And Frank Beacon, a pioneer of marine photography who died in 1970 and who took the last ever professional photograph of HMS Titanic as it left Southampton docks on its fateful last journey. The cemetery has many species of flora and fauna with butterflies, red squirrels, green woodpeckers, and an abundance of fungi. A new conservation area has now been created at the rear of the cemetery. This meadow area will be preserved until needed for burial with minimum cutting. This area attracts many butterflies and insects and is full of ancient meadow indicator plants such as grass vetchling. At the rear of the cemetery lies the island's only dedicated Muslim burial plot, now encircled with palm and olive trees and a prayer board. The site is truly a multi-faith cemetery and provides wonderful opportunities for people, young and old, to learn about different faith and cultural approaches to death and bereavement. Close by, the grant enabled the building of a wooden gazebo, a place for prayer and reflection, or of course, sheltering from the rain. The cemetery now contains the island's only municipal natural burial ground, created thanks to the grant to provide a new and more environmentally friendly burial choice for local people. Created in a formerly overgrown woodland area at the rear of the site, these plots now provide a wonderful woodland walk. No headstones are permitted in this area, and burial is natural since only biodegradable coffins are permitted. Surrounded by wild flowers and woodland trees, this area provides a truly peaceful burial setting. Although full of natural life, the cemetery, of course, contains some very painful memories, but also records the best of human endeavor. Close to the natural burial ground is the communal war memorial. In May 1942, the town of Cowes came under attack from 160 Luftwaffe planes. A Polish destroyer docked in Cowes for a refit bravely came to the rescue and saved countless lives. 28 people killed in the attack were buried in a communal grave in the cemetery marked by a large memorial stone, which has now also been restored. Every 5 years, a commemorative service is held to remember the bravery of the Polish seamen, and strong links with the Polish community remain to this day. Thanks to the support of the Heritage Lottery Fund and the Big Lottery Fund, and the dedicated work of the Friends of Northwood Cemetery, the site has been rescued from further decline. The heritage and conservation value preserved for future generations to enjoy. Over 14,000 people visit the site each year, and in the years to come, thousands more will come to pray, reflect, learn, and enjoy all that this wonderful cemetery has to offer.